Hello and welcome to our TipHaus webinar on legal compliance and security. We're going to be talking a lot about a subject that we don't get a lot of talk about today. My name is Michael Corson. I'm the manager of customer success here at TipHaus. If you've been to any of our past office hour sessions or past webinars, you've seen me talk. If you've had onboardings over the last few years, you've probably heard me in person and got to meet me in person. I really love our customers. I love getting to talk to you all at once like this. I'm coming to you from Billings, Montana today, a little bit outside my normal area of South America. If you see on the right-hand side, you'll see a little chat. Go ahead and let us know who you are, where you're coming in from, say hello to everybody, and also feel free to just flood that chat with questions. So as I talk about stuff, I'll go through everything I think is important, but what I really want to do is talk about what you think is important. So put your questions over there and we'll dive into that kind of stuff together. When I was kind of coming up with webinar topics for this year, it became kind of clear to me that we do a lot of talking about two areas of TipHaus kind of repeatedly, and we kind of leave this third area of TipHaus in the background. And it's in the background because hopefully this is something you never have to think about, and hopefully this is something that you never have to, never have to go through in terms of an audit or a lawsuit or anything like that. But so kind of the way we think about things at TipHaus, the core value of TipHaus is, I like to think of it as kind of balanced on top of three pillars. So there's the pillar of automation. So, using computer power and software and interesting things and rule types to make things easy for you. And then there's the kind of pillar of transparency, which is just making sure that you know what your managers are doing, that managers know what their employees are doing, that employees know what the managers are doing, and everybody knows what everybody's doing so that everybody is on the same page. The third pillar that we don't talk about, that we're going to be talking about a lot today, is compliance. And that is the idea of what rules do you need to follow and how does TipHaus help you follow them. There's going to be three kind of main areas that we're going to talk about when it comes to compliance. Things that you can do preemptively and things that TipHaus brings to the table to help you stay preemptively compliant by making smart decisions when you set up your rules. There's going to be a kind of compliance blended with transparency aspects. So, how does transparency help you catch issues early if an issue does pop up kind of while you're using TipHaus? And then at the kind of end of the webinar, we'll talk about kind of what happens if the worst should happen. So if you do go through an audit, if you do go through a lawsuit or something like that, how are you better situated to go through that? And how does TipHaus have things ready to go for you to kind of help you get through those processes? So we don't talk about this a ton because the core value is much more upfront. You're saving time, you're saving money, you're reducing employee questions and that sort of thing. The compliance piece is no less important, but is definitely kind of a hidden value and something that's a little bit more in the background. Now, if you do have to hop off the meeting at any point, don't worry, there will be a video of this session that you can get a hold of. At the end, I'm going to be plugging a few things, so I'll plug them here at the front as well. There is a new feature called QR that we're going to plug a little QR code for. If you do just go to your client dashboard, you can reach out for more information about that. It's just an awesome way to get more tips to your staff. We're also going to have a couple webinars coming up. So another one that's a little bit deeper into compliance from a legal perspective with a firm that we're going to talk about called Zeller Law. And then another one on Earned Tip Access. So if you are curious about where Earned Tip Access is at and maybe how it's different than it was a year and a half ago, or if you don't know what that is and you just want to learn about payouts and how to get money to your staff's hands faster for free, you can come to that webinar as well. If you have any questions about any of those, feel free to ask me about that after the webinar, and we'll get that information to you. All right, let's get started. Proactive compliance. So this is the piece where we talk about being compliant ahead of time. So taking your vitamins so that you don't need to take your medicine earlier is a phrase that gets thrown around a lot when we talk about proactive compliance. The benefit of proactive compliance is that compliance issues are typically way harder to fix when you've already fallen into the trap of kind of becoming uncompliant. And once you're at that point and somebody's looking into things and they want to go into that kind of stuff, a lot of documentation that you need to do, a lot of proof, a lot of going back through the last year or the last couple of years and proving what you have been doing, explaining what you did a year ago can be hard to kind of remember for one thing, but also kind of difficult to get the reporting together in a way that people want to see it. TipHaus does help with that, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But much, much easier just to start off your tip process from a place of compliance. Automation is the big key to that. So, kind of helping eliminate errors before they happen. A lot of the things that we do at TipHaus already play into this proactive compliance. But really just through reducing manual processes and just reducing the ability for humans to come into the process and make mistakes. That's a big piece of it that's just kind of built into the software. And then we're going to talk a little bit during this section about how you can keep track of non-automated actions like custom team adjustments and rule changes and stuff like that. A lot of this kind of stuff is done on the back end of TipHaus, but we do quite a bit of activity logging. So we'll talk about this now. When we talk about that first piece, avoiding error through automation, the value of the one-way integration and creating a point of truth can't really be understated here in its importance when it comes to compliance. When we look at the TipHaus dashboard, so I'm share my demo org, and we'll go to Bogey's Bonanza, my fake restaurant here. When we get to this reporting page, if you remember back to your webinar, we always say something along the lines of, we pull in this information from the POS, we pull in this information from your time tracking software. And as you make changes in your POS or your time tracking software, TipHaus stays up to date. And you can either let us manually pull in that information, or maybe you're clicking the sync button to bring it in a little faster. However it works, we're matching up to your POS system or your time tracking software, or both, as a point of truth, right? And we always follow that up by saying, and if you make a change in TipHaus, it does not push back into your POS, and it does not push back into your time tracking software. We blow through that in the onboarding is just a description of how TipHaus works. But that one-way integration of information just coming from your softwares into ours is incredibly important when it comes to compliance. Being able to show, that things are being manipulated in the POS level and TipHaus is matching that is a key portion of not only making sure that what's in your POS matches what's in TipHaus and what goes onto the paychecks. That is obviously important for many reasons, just as, if you're an accountant or if you're running a business and you just need to keep track of every cent, obviously important. If you're an employee and you want to make sure you get the money, obviously important. But it is at the core of what people want to see when an audit does happen. So if somebody needs to take a closer look, what you're going to have to prove is you're going to have to say, okay, does what came into my system match what came into TipHaus, what they use for their calculations, match what went out to the employees? So keeping that integration one way helps make sure that everything stays clear across the board, which is very, very important. The other thing about automation that is incredibly valuable for compliance is just reducing processes and reducing human error. So if you're in a spreadsheet, you may have 6 or 7 processes that go into getting information from your staff or from your POS into that spreadsheet. So maybe your staff come in and they need to tell you how much cash they got, and they need to tell you how print out their reports and get them the drink sales and all that kind of stuff. It's a manual process where something could go wrong. They need to communicate that to the manager. The manager needs to go into the spreadsheet. They need to type all of those things in. Another place where something could go wrong. Maybe along the line, you need to update your spreadsheet. You need to go into Excel. You need to input different formulas. You need that kind of stuff. Another place where something can go wrong. So these stacking kind of manual processes are all kind of points of failure where something could go wrong. And even if you're very well intentioned and really trying to be proactive with compliance when you're using spreadsheets, it can be incredibly hard to do. With TipHaus, we take all of that on and say, hey, rather than having all those humans interacting with that kind of stuff, we'll get as many eyes as we can on the data, and we will bring all that information in with as few human interactions as possible. Now, if you came to my events webinar, you know that there are moments where things are not automatable, right? So things like rule changes, things like custom team adjustments. Maybe you want to send this $23 tip to somebody specific. Maybe you need to have a manager come in here and tell us who worked the party and who needs to share in that tip. Some things will always be non-automatable, as much as we'd like to be mind readers and know ahead of time who's going to work those events. Sometimes it's just not possible. So what we do in TipHaus is we try to have a general rule with any product feature we build. It says, if it is a non-automatable action, that we want to leave a trail and we want to leave a log so that we can uncover who did that action, right? It is a fine line to walk. Obviously, there's There's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of things going on in the back end. There's a lot of button clicks going on in here for a lot of accounts. We don't want these logs to be so big that they're cumbersome. And so what we've done is we've buried quite a bit of it in our backend, but they are accessible to us if you need to look. So other logs, you'll notice, are just buried throughout the product. And you just need to do a little bit of looking, specifically for colors, to kind of uncover these moments where we've logged it for you. So if I come in here and I create a custom team adjustment and I tell TipHaus, okay, we need to do something special with these $23. It's not going to go through the standard automation. It's going to be a non-automatable thing. And we're going to give it out to Aida and Adriana here. We review it, we enable the standard tip sharing rules, and we submit. You'll notice immediately this sale gets tagged. And it gets tagged with a nice little blue circle. So anything blue like this, typically, especially on a sale level, work shift level, says that this is something that's manually being done, something that's going to be manually touched by somebody on your staff. If you click on that, you'll see the log. So it'll say how much was shared, who was selected, were tip sharing rules applied. In this case, I did, and who did it. So in this case, it was me, TipHaus representative. On our back end, and we'd be able to see that it was actually specifically Michael Corson. But if it was you logging in, you would see your name here. If it was a general manager, you'd see their name here, so that we can see when it happened, who did it, and you can go directly to them and ask them, okay, why was this done? You know, somebody needs to take a look. We're a little bit confused on why you chose to not send this to the whole staff and just send it to these two people. Who do we need to talk to? Well, it's right here and it's logged for you. It's also undoable, which is nice. So you can always remove that if you'd like. You'll also notice the things that happen in your POS get logged with colors as well. So if you were to come in here and refund a tip at some point to a customer, and maybe they meant to leave $2.37, but they accidentally wrote $23.70. When you refund, you know, that $21 or so, you'll see a red exclamation point, and you can hover over it, and it'll say, you know, a refund was applied to this sale. Same thing if you were to apply a refund using our refund tool in TipHaus, if you have that turned on, it would show you, how much was refunded and where it was applied. Other things we're working on exposing to you as the customer, so giving you a kind of an activity log of who changed rules as time goes on. We always kind of recommend not having too many people involved in changing rules and kind of keeping those permissions kind of consolidated, so that you know for a fact that, you know, if a rule is changing, it's you that's doing that change. But we know that businesses are not always, it's not always easy to just have one person have access to everything. And maybe you want to spread that access out. Maybe you want to let everybody have access to that, just for ease of doing things if somebody needs to go on vacation or something like that. In our backend, we keep an activity log of every change that happens. So you would see on our backend, this was the rule in this date. This is the date the rule was changed. These were the settings of the rule beforehand. These are the settings of the rule afterhand. This is who made the adjustment. All of that kind of stuff is logged on our backend so that we can take a look at it. We are working on maybe exploring some ways to bring that into your view. But for the moment, we save it in the background so that it doesn't clutter everything up. If you need that information, you can come ask us and we can dig up quite a bit for you. You also remember probably from your onboarding the ability to deactivate rules or delete rules. We always encourage deactivating rules as a piece here, so you know exactly which dates were covered by which rule sets. So if this rule here, bartender to busser, was, you know, effective on March 16th and it was created on April 8th, we know that, you know, calculations starting on the day March 16th are under this rule set. Well, what happened before March 16th? That would live in your inactive rule set if you had a rule doing something for bartenders to bussers. We can open up the inactive rule set and say, okay, here are the rules that used to be active. What was happening from dates before that? In this case, there's nothing here, but if you did see a rule here, maybe it would say, you know, from January of 2023 up until March 16th of 2024, this was the rule set that was in place, and these are the calculations that are in place. Another way that we kind of just we try not to destroy data, and we try to let you know after a change was made, who made the change, when things were in effect, what the dates were, all these sorts of things play into the types of questions that you're going to get if you ever do fall into a compliance issue. You know, in addition to logging actions and things like that, and you know, using automation, there are other aspects to preventable compliance that are worth talking about. One of the biggest pieces of you know, proactive compliance is bringing in experts. And when you come with TipHaus, you're going to bring in the expertise of our team. We have a lot of experience over here just from talking to thousands of customers about their tip scenarios and problems they've had in the past. We become experts in our own right on what legal compliance means in different states or in different areas, different parts of the country. Most of these questions, if you have a question about a gray area, you've never been clear on what the rule is here, most of those we can answer for you directly. But when we can't answer those directly, we always kind of point you back to the right resource in your area. So whether that be a like restaurant association area that we know is good on tip compliance, or whether that be a website or a page on your Secretary of State website for you that deals with tip law, we can definitely look into that stuff. If there's a new law in your area and you're confused about it, we can look into that as well. We also recently have partnered with Zeller Law at a deeper level. Zeller Law is a law firm out of California that deals specifically with tip and restaurant law. They're actually going to be talking to us in an upcoming webinar. So if you're interested in hearing from directly from a legal team, you can talk with them. We typically don't need to interact with them on most tip questions, but if there is a really pressing need to say, hey, we need airtight legal expertise, not TipHaus expertise on something, we can either contact them for you and get a consultation, or we can put you in touch with them as well, and you can hire their services for yourself so that you can get good answers on the things that you need answers to. So becoming compliant from the start by bringing in tip experts to help you design your system can't be understated as well. When we talk about legal compliance and this sort of thing, we also have a lot to talk about in terms of employee trust. So when we talk about transparency and this kind of stuff, this is going to fall into not a little bit of proactive compliance, but also reducing errors by catching them early, which is the next thing we're going to talk about. When we talk about transparency, having trust in the tip software can prevent problems from happening. If you have employees that are on the lookout and everything's buried behind the scenes, and one person has access to the spreadsheet that controls how tips are calculated, and they just get an envelope full of cash and hope that that number is correct and hope that the right amount was taken out to tip out all the people in house, you can quickly find a trust issue on your hands. So having a tip software that lets employees know that you are keeping a record of your actions and your manager's actions can actually prevent compliance issues and can prevent like the lawsuit side of this stuff, where employees might come at you because they feel like they've been underpaid or whatever that is, whether or not it's true or not. Building trust by saying, hey, not only do we care about transparency here, but we care so much that we are willing to go out and buy a software that is at its core there to protect you and make sure that everything that we're doing is transparent and clear to you, so that no dollars are falling through the cracks and no dollars are going to a place where they shouldn't. So letting employees know that you're keeping a record of your actions is huge. Letting your managers know that you're keeping a record of their actions, also huge. And giving them the right tools to make sure that they are not making innocent mistakes that actually cost people money or lead to a lawsuit or lead to an audit or something like that. Absolutely something to think about when you're thinking about what is the value I get out of TipHaus, or what is the value I get out of any tip software. Something to look for. Providing that transparency is something that as I mentioned earlier, is one of our core pillars. There is a lot more to talk about there. We've talked about a lot on past webinars. I'm sure we'll talk about more in the future as well, but it is really key. Key to prevent employees coming at you from a place of like always looking to make sure, always wondering what's going on behind the scenes. But it's also important, even if you are doing everything right, and even if you are really looking out for your employees and doing everything you can, with a spreadsheet, there could be a lawsuit that's brought your way. And even if you go to court with that and you find, oh yeah, we didn't do anything wrong, and we're exonerated in the process, just having your restaurant's name involved in a lawsuit can cause hiring issues in the future. So rather than keeping things behind the scenes and then having to prove, yes, I was correct later on, keeping everything out in the open and keeping everything transparent is a great way to go. When we talk about TipHaus as well, beyond kind of compliance, we do talk about security quite a bit. You'll notice when you log into TipHaus, you'll see now that we're moving towards like single sign-on things, we're adding security features in the background all the time. We recently gave a talk on our new users tab and our users and roles. This kind of stuff is all designed for security so that when you come in and look at your log, you know exactly the names that you're going to see on that log in TipHaus. So security and compliance go hand in hand, but that's a discussion for another time. Now, when we talk about catching compliance issues rather than preventing compliance issues, that transparency piece that I just spoke about is huge. The way that we really offer transparency at the employee level is the employee app, right? So if you remember our talks on that, the employee app is just a representation of the employee of exactly what you see in the client dashboard. It's just filtered out just to show their information. It shows a little bit of information so that they can understand how we got to our numbers. So they can kind of look back and say, okay, does this match the way that I was told that this is supposed to work? It also gives them a view into all the rules at your business, and it gives them access to our team as well. So it gives them access to some expertise as well, so that we can cop in when we need to and say, hey, you know, I get that you feel that maybe your tips are incorrect. Let me walk you through how we got to this number based on your rule set, so that you can just be sure that you're thinking of it the right way. A lot of employees will come to us and say, hey, you know, my number seems low. My number seems low. I got $200 in take home on the 9th, and I feel like I should have gotten $400 in take home in the 9th. And a lot of those conversations boil down to a small misunderstanding on how the rules are working or something like that, or just opening up the product together and showing the employees the math behind it and showing them the rules, or showing them that, you know, hey, you know, a part of your tips were under your name and they went out because those were actually event tips. And so those were shared and split 3 ways equally. So, you know, 400 would be right if there weren't these event tips involved. Oftentimes it's not a problem at all that gets brought to our attention. It's just a educational moment. That's always good for us to know. But every once in a while, an employee will come in and catch something and say, hey, you know, this is not the way it works. And TipHaus will loop in the proper management or loop in the org admin and say, hey, an employee brought this to our attention. They said that they should have received $400. When they described to me how they thought the system was supposed to work, it didn't match up with what we saw. Let's take a look here and figure out what went wrong. Most of the time in TipHaus, we catch those kinds of things in a pay period. So you make a rule change on a Monday, and by Thursday or Friday, we're aware of it because your employees are tuned in and they're looking at this transparency and they're offering to raise their hand early and say, hey, something doesn't look quite right here. That is incredibly important. And so we look into every request that's brought our way seriously to make sure that we catch these things early. You know, if something was to fall through the cracks, and it has happened in TipHaus, where you tell the system to do something, and then you realize 6 months later that the thing you told it to do was not a compliant thing to do. You know, TipHaus, we like to say behind the scenes, it's a very sharp knife, and it'll do what you ask it to do, and you know, you can cut yourself with it and make a mistake. In those cases, you know, we can go back. We can go back and we can recalculate. In most cases, we really want to keep things locked up and let you go back about 2 pay periods to make changes. But in a case where 6 months of calculations have been made incorrectly, we can go back and we can do things on the back end to generally uncover, you know, uncover where the mistake went wrong, identify the date where it started, run a calculation back in time, give you numbers, say, hey, this is what you paid out over the last 6 months, and this is what you should have paid out, so that you can quickly make things right for your employees. Again, giving you access to employees for the employee app will drastically reduce any risk of that. The more people who have eyes on TipHaus, you know, the fewer problems you're going to find. Another good point to call out, you know, when you talk about the employees having access to the employee app, giving your team access to TipHaus, and you know, maybe it's really the manager's job to handle the day-to-day stuff. That does not mean that they need to necessarily be the only one with eyes on it. You can do protected permissions through our roles and permissions tab, and you could say, hey, yeah, manager is going to have the ability to click some buttons. Org admin is going to have some ability to change rules and that kind of stuff. But you know, we're going to give our accountants and we're going to give our other people access to look at this stuff so that they can catch things early. It is an incredibly useful thing to trust your staff with this data to look at it. And it may feel a little bit weird, and maybe you're opening up the floodgates to questions that you don't want to have answered, but you're also opening up the possibility to somebody catching an error that could really save you in the long run. So we always recommend it. Within our recommendations, we do understand that there's a broad range of different amounts of access that you want to give people for various reasons. So that's where we're working all the time to kind of give you the ability to customize the employee experience for yourself, or customize the client dashboard experience for different people. In addition to giving people access, we also want to make sure that they understand, right? So we train employees when they ask us, and we kind of do that on demand. There's also things that we do that are kind of fall into the ongoing training aspect of this kind of thing, to make sure that people understand what they're looking at. If you bring somebody new onto your team and you want them to learn about TipHaus, we are adding all of these webinars to our YouTube channel. You can go in there and poke around, find the video that's right for you. There's stuff on the employee app to train employee app users. There's stuff on there about the employee app to train managers about what employees see on the employee app. There's also just general management training on what the client dashboard is and what the buttons do. Beyond that, we can also train them on your specific needs. So if you have somebody who is new to the company and they're going to be taking over TipHaus, and the person who previously did it had a really awesome opportunity and they had to leave immediately before training the new person, we can understand what's going on in your account, and we can work with them to bring them up to speed on the actual operations within your account. So all of this kind of stuff, making sure people understand what's going on, making sure they know what they're looking at, making sure that they have access to things to look at, very, very important. I do want to move on here. I don't want to spend too much time here, but there's one more aspect here that's really kind of worth talking about, and I kind of blew past it. When we talk about preventative compliance, or if we talk about catching issues early on, we can talk about catching issues within TipHaus, or we can talk about building rules within TipHaus that are correct from the start. But one of the values that you do get when you come onto TipHaus, and some of you may have been through this experience, probably most of you have not, but there is a surprising number of cases where we'll go through a sales trial with someone, or we'll go through an onboarding, or we'll go through weeks of trying to match up a spreadsheet to TipHaus's numbers and get those two to be exact, so the employees don't experience too much of a hiccup switching from the old system to our system. A lot of times what we find is that in those spreadsheets, a single formula error was added 10 years ago to a cell and nobody caught it for 10 years. And, as we're trying to match up the spreadsheet based on a formula that you thought was in these cells, and then we go in, and it's not until you go through this process and we do the digging and we do these kind of things that an error is made. So moving through TipHaus, moving from an old process to TipHaus or to another tip solution, and help uncover that kind of stuff. It can help bring the truth of what you've been doing in your spreadsheets to light when maybe they haven't been going through an internal audit very often, because who wants to audit an Excel spreadsheet for cell by cell? So just wanted to toss that in there as I kind of blew past it. When we move on from that point, so removing proactive compliance from the equation, removing transparency from the equation, and we think about the worst case scenario where you are going through a tip audit, or you're going through a lawsuit or something like that. What does a tip audit look like with TipHaus versus without TipHaus? The core of a tip audit is going to be the same. They're going to be asking you to kind of prove to them what you've been doing and make sure that it is in line with the laws, right? So the tasks you're going to have to do are going to be the same. What TipHaus brings to the table is a way to consolidate everything that you're going to need in one spot. And that is, might not seem like that important of a thing until you're going back through spreadsheets, or until you're being asked to drill into a specific row on a file of what you did and why this one day over the last year or two looks incorrect, or something manual happened on this day on the spreadsheet and you don't know why it happened, right? So without TipHaus, a lot of people, for better or for worse, intentionally or non-intentionally, have scattered records. They have manual calculations added to spreadsheets that are meant to be automated. There's missing data because somebody put the file in a wrong folder, or because it lived on a computer in an office and that computer crashed 2 years ago. In general, what we see is longer audits and increased legal risk. With TipHaus, everything is instantly exportable. So if somebody needs a specific date, you just go grab it. If they need a specific kind of view of the information, we can add custom columns for you and give them the exact information in the exact way that they want to see it. We can give you clean reports. We can give you clear compliance, right? We can give you a list of your rules that are just available for view, and you can take those people who are auditing you into the software and say, hey, these are the rules. This is the way they're working. This is how it's there. If you have questions about what's actually happening on the math, we can walk you through that. In general, we see faster resolutions. And to be perfectly transparent with you, we don't see a ton of people going through audits in TipHaus, which is fantastic. And that's partially just luck of the draw, but we have seen 3 or 4, a couple major companies, a couple small companies. With TipHaus, it's not that crazy. They typically come to us and they're obviously stressed out, and maybe a week or 2 later, they're through the audit and they're happy that they had everything on hand, right? What we see much more often is people that go through a tip audit or go through a tip lawsuit, and that is the instigating factor for them coming and going to market and saying, I need a tip solution. We see that much more often. So what we don't want you to do is be stuck on your own here. So if everybody in this meeting is a TipHaus user, if you have something like this happen, come to us first and we can help you out. But everything's going to be there for you, especially in the client dashboard. You can go back through the breakdown. You can go back as far as you want and select dates. You can get that kind of stuff on demand. But on the reporting page, there's the breakdown snapshots as well. So if you want to go back, every time a pay period locks, TipHaus saves a record of that data. So you can go back and you can grab that data here. If you were to lock a pay period, we generate the file. If you were to unlock it and make a change and then lock it again, we generate a second file too. So you can see all of this stuff laid up. You just grab it here, select it, and download it as a CSV and pass it off to the people who need to take a look at it. That is our wish is that you never go through this kind of stuff, but if you do, we're here for you. When we talk about what non-compliance can cost you, we through our partnership with Zeller Law, we found that wage and hour lawsuits are on the rise in restaurants. So this is something that's just increasing. Not having a tip solution here, what it really is going to cost you, and in the best case scenarios, it's going to cost you time. Without TipHaus, you're going to be digging for files. Maybe you're very organized, and maybe that's not something that would have been a problem for you. With TipHaus, we can guarantee that we can get you through it faster. When we're talking about the worst case scenario there, the amount of money could be something that is for a large business, for 60 units, 70 units, 100 unit restaurant groups, maybe it's not the end of the world. You get slapped with a lawsuit and maybe it's something you can move on from and regrettably pay something out. For most businesses that we have, it's 1 unit, it's 2 units, it's three units. For somebody like that, it can be devastating. It can be enough to take the restaurant under. It could be enough to make for a very bad year, or it could be enough to have to reduce staffing, or anything in between. But the idea about what non-compliance can cost you is what we repeatedly hear is that it's different for every restaurant and depends on what you have on hand and depends on how large the lawsuit is, but you really don't know until the end. And it's not something that you can really mitigate once the process is started. Fines and penalties from the Department of Labor as well also can be high, and same boat. Could be something you could weather, it could be something you can't weather. Best to try to start compliant from a place of compliance so that you don't run into that kind of stuff. And then let's talk best case scenario in a situation where you've gone through an audit or you've been sued. Even if you were in the right in those situations, having your name in the newspapers as having a lawsuit brought against you can be enough to keep people from wanting to work for you or from public wanting to be with your restaurant. So negative publicity in this kind of space is definitely something to think about. Here at TipHaus, we actually have a channel, and it scrubs the internet and it looks through and it says, okay, look for anybody who's going through these things because they might need expertise and they might need a tip solution. So we see a lot of these things going through the news cycles and local news stations and nationwide. There's a lot of lawsuits every day. So remaining compliant is going to be the way to go. Alternatively, kind of the return of investment on doing this right. The reduced legal risk by staying compliant is huge. The boosting of employee morale is incredibly important. When you talk about employee morale, working for money like tips, it can be a bit nebulous. A lot of times employees, when they get cash envelope, they get the envelope, they put it in their pocket, and then they look at their pay stubs or they pay taxes and they look at the pay stubs, they're going to go making $10 or $15,000 a year or something like that. And they're not really thinking about the entirety of what they're making. So having TipHaus employee app, having them be able to see their actual adjusted wages for tips, and so they can look at the end of the month and say, okay, yeah, I'm making significantly more than what it looks like on my pay stub. That kind of stuff is incredibly important. Employees typically want to work for places that are using tip softwares. They want to know that they're working for companies who care about transparency. They want to know that they're going to be able to hold their managers accountable, and they're going to know that they're getting their fair share for the very hard work that they're all doing. So keeping employees happy, attracting new talent, keeping them there. We see repeatedly that employees stay longer for restaurants that use TipHaus. It is just something that is very true across the board. There's also the idea of saving money just by avoiding lawsuits and fines, should the worst happen. That kind of stuff can't be understated. So to sum up, when we talk about this piece of compliance, we really want to think about potential losses in conjunction with the cost of actually buying a product like this. So I may be kind of preaching to the choir and probably preaching to the wrong group in terms of people who already use this software. But what I really wanted to do on this webinar was just kind of expose to you kind of some of the hidden benefits of what you're already using, and let you know what's there should you ever come up against this kind of stuff. In addition to some of the hidden wins I've listed there as well, the lower employee turnover and that kind of stuff. We also get better customer satisfaction. Happy employees give better service. I don't know if you were on my call or not, but if you were, when we talked about the employee app, one of the metrics that they get in their key performance indicators is their average tip percentage over time. That kind of stuff allows them to say, hey, I'm on average getting left a 15% tip by customers. What's going on here? And they can go to their manager and they're like, hey, is there anything I can do to get better at this kind of stuff? The managers actually have an access to a page on their homepage that can show tip percentage by employee. So they could say, hey, go talk to X person. They're making 23% tips on average. Figure out what they're doing. We do see employees generally kind of increasing their tip percentage as they're with TipHaus because they're aware of it on average. So striving for a better tip percentage, what they're really striving for is better customer satisfaction. So using TipHaus can kind of bring out the best in your employees. And then stronger brand reputation, not getting sued and not having your company's name drubbed through the mud is always a win. And being known as a company that takes care of their employees and has employees that trust them and has employees that give great service is always a plus. So when we talk about being customizable, secure, audit ready, all of these things that we talked about today go hand in hand. Just to sum up, permanent record keeping that's happening on data that's coming in without human intervention or without the risk of human error. The ability to undo past errors, the ability to go back and calculate retroactively when a mistake happens, wildly valuable when things do go wrong. And is industry-leading compliance expertise at your fingertips. We're here for you. We have legal expertise for the things that we don't know about directly. If you need actual legal representation, we can put you in touch with people like that. We can lead you to people in your area who know what they're talking about for things in your area. We can look into law changes that come up as they come up. We also run something called the TipHaus Insider. If you look at the beginning of this webinar, it says TipHaus Insider Webinar. The actual original TipHaus Insider was is a mailer, an email that goes out. So check your email. You're getting those if you're a user. We send out up-to-date information about important changes that are happening across the restaurant space in the United States, and we keep our eye on that. We keep a close attention on that, and then we try to pass it off to you in that newsletter. So if you haven't been reading that, open it up. If you're not getting that, let me know or check your spam folder. But lots of good information coming out on that mailer as well. With Zeller Law Group, this is the group that we partner with in California to kind of give us legal perspective on things. In general, again, we can answer things with our own expertise, but this is here for us. Our next webinar on this is going to be dealing with them directly. So hearing from them and hearing their kind of take on this in specifically law of California, but for anybody, it'd be good webinar to attend. As I mentioned earlier, we have some new features coming out. The QR code tipping is out. It is available. Scan this QR code here, and you can get more information on it. You can see here in this little video kind of a little bit about the guest experience. This is incredibly valuable as a way to get more tips into your employees' hands, and not only for employees that aren't kind of traditionally tipped. Kind of think of the obvious ones, the valets, the people who are parking cars for people where maybe they're traditionally given a $20 bill, but in a world where people are carrying less cash, how does that work out? Well, we have a solution for you here. It is fantastic. A couple of our beta customers for it have already said that one is a hotel and they're using it for their omelet station chefs, and they've seen 25% increase in tips to those folks. They're also using it for their drivers, similarly 20 to 25% tips over the kind of first month of using it. So yeah, game changer for those types of employees. There are tons of ways we could see this being used, but really we want to hear from you. So scan the QR code, reach out to us, go to your client dashboard, go to the QR page and click the button for more information. This is as we've been thinking about it, as we've been talking to customers, this is something really any restaurant could use, not just for restaurants that have like the obvious needs for QR tipping, like a valet or something like that. So reach out about this. We got tons of information for you. It is incredibly easy to turn on, and it is 100% free for businesses. This is the QR code here for California tip pooling and tip sharing best practices. This is going to be that one with Zeller Law Group. So if you want to register for that, go ahead and scan the code here and let us know what you, just scan the code and register and come and learn from them. They're awesome people and they're very, very knowledgeable. I'm going to put these QR codes back up on the screen during the question and answer session as well. Last but not least, Earn Tip Access continues to grow here at TipHaus. We went through some massive changes back at the end of last year. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of change. It was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that went into getting us to a place where we can grow the product and offer new features and do new things. We are excited to tell you what we're working on, the state of ETA, exactly what's going on here. This is just a way to pay out your employees their tips faster and electronically. You can do this in conjunction with standard payroll. You can do it for everybody on your staff. Again, another free feature. If you're interested in it, go ahead and go to the client dashboard and click the find out more information. We'd love to get you signed up. For businesses, you can really sign up in 15, 20 minutes. This is going to be a great chance to hear from our team about where we're at with this. I won't be speaking on this one. This will be from our COO, Kurt Grogan, I believe. He has a lot to share because we have made a lot of changes and a lot of improvements. So we're really excited to show you where we're at here in the new year. You can reach out to www.tiphaus.com. There's going to be a chat icon there. There's a phone number for you here. There's an email address. There's a chat icon in the client dashboard. Doesn't matter who you get in contact with on our team. We're all going to be willing to help, and we're all going to be happy to help. That's my whole goal as customer success manager, is to make sure that anybody you reach out to has answers for you. These webinars are one way to kind of give you information as they come out. So keep an eye out for more webinars in the future. Again, there's the Zeller Law one coming up next, and then the Earn Tip Access one coming after that. But if you have questions or if you want more information on these features that I just talked about, definitely don't have to wait for a webinar. Just reach out to us however you want to reach out to us, and we'll get you the answers you need, and we'll get you help. All right. Always a pleasure doing these webinars. Hope you have a fantastic week. We'll talk to you next time. All right. Bye-bye.